These are for controlling our flight.
Flight?
Well, yes. You see, we travel around in here through time and space. Oh, no. Don't laugh. It's true. Your father and Maxtable were working on the same problem, but I have perfected a rather special model, which enables me to travel through the universe of time.
How can you? I mean, if what you say is true, you must be, well... How old?
Well, if we count in Earth terms, I suppose I must be about 400... Yes, about 450 years old. Yes. Well, quite.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always...
I'm Scott, hello.
Hello, Scott. This week we are covering the Tomb of the Cybermen. I didn't forget what the episode was called, even though I have it right in front of me. The second Doctor adventure from the very far away year of 1967.
It's either set in 2020 or set in 2067, depending on who you ask, which is interesting. So this episode took place last year, potentially.
Interesting. It's not on Earth though, is it? So does it?
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it's on
it doesn't-
Talos.
Yeah. But this episode first aired on the 2nd of September 1967, which was a Saturday, and at the time of recording was 53 years, 11 months, and 29 days ago, which
is insane.
quite the while ago, to say the least. Could you, Scott, hazard any guess, and I would be incredibly impressed if you got this, as to who was the president of the United States on this day?
Probably an old white man, am I correct?
That is actually wrong. It was a black lizard.
Oh
no,
my god.
It was indeed an old white man called Lyndon B. Johnson, who was a Democrat. And he actually seems like a pretty interesting dude. After he took office, he won passage of a major tax cut, passed the Clean Air Act and the Civil Rights Act in 1964. And after the 1964 election, he passed even more sweeping reforms, such as the Social Security Amendments of 65 and the two government-run healthcare programs, Medicare and Medi-Aid. He got a lot done, a lot of social care stuff done, which is, important stuff.
Yeah, sounds like he was pretty progressive in a way.
Yeah, well, it's the 60s, it's the peak of the hippie movement. It's not until the late 70s, early 80s where people went, no, I hate good things. Could you guess the UK Prime Minister? This one's even harder.
Was it an old white man?
You're like a historian. It was indeed an old white man known as Harold Wilson, who was a Labour Prime Minister, who led a narrow victory in the 1964 election, becoming Prime Minister, and his first period as Prime Minister saw very low unemployment rates and relative economic prosperity. However, later he would become hindered by significant problems with Britain's external balance of payments, is what Google told me. So, not quite as successful as Mr. Lyndon B. Johnson when it came to leading countries, it seems.
What year did he become Prime Minister?
1964, same year as Lyndon B. Johnson, actually.
Maybe 1967 was the year he started going downhill as Prime Minister, so I was about to say maybe it was a good year for overall, but not if he was becoming bad.
Yeah, which is a shame. The top 10 films in the cinema on this day were quite interesting. A lot of them were things I haven't... Actually, I've heard of some of them. Could you have any guess as to what the number one film is? I really doubt you would, though you'd probably get one of them on this list. You could definitely get one of them on this list.
Planet of the Apes is the only thing I can think of, but I think that's 1968, so I'm clueless.
Yeah,
The Graduate?
Oh my god, you're right. It is The
Yes!
Graduate. The Graduate is number 1 at the box office on this weekend, and I think it's just this year is where I got this list from, but The Graduate was number 1 indeed for this year of 1967. The Graduate, which grossed $43 million in 1967, which is just an insane amount of money for back then.
How much, sorry?
$43 million.
Yeah.
That is a lot of money. And so much money, in fact, the number 2 spot, and this is for the entire year, goes to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which raked in $25 million. It made double the money that the number 2 slot did. Well, almost double. 25 plus 25 is 50, but whatever. But this year also saw the release of The Jungle Book.
Oh, fuck, yes.
Yeah, which came in at number 9, making $13 million, and that film is way older than I thought it was. Jesus
It really is. When we grew up, we were watching it on video, just thinking it was released like last year.
Yeah, it holds up. It holds up pretty well.
It really does. I haven't seen the remake in a while. The remake wasn't too bad. What did you think of the remake?
The live action one with oh my god, what's his name? Ghostbusters man.
Bill Murray.
Yeah, the live action one with Bill Murray. I loved it. I really enjoyed I loved it in the cinema. I never watched Mowgli though.
Neither did I. I wanted to watch Mowgli, but I don't know why. It's on Netflix. I could watch it any time, but I just never got around to it.
Yeah, I never got around to watching Mowgli either, but I really enjoyed The Jungle Book.
The Jungle Book is a lot better than the live action, quote unquote, remake of The Lion King.
Never watched it. I do love Jon Favreau, but yeah, I've heard mostly negative things about the remake of The Lion King.
It really isn't good. It's just the same movie without all the soul, which is important for a movie.
Yeah, but it's an almost impossible task to remake The Lion King. One of the best animated films of all time.
True.
The number 1 song at the top of the charts. It's not a box office; it's the charts, which you will 100% guess because I sent it to you. You have any guess as to what it could be?
Was it Backstreet Boys?
Close. Next year was the Backstreet Boys. It was "Ode to Billy Joe" by Bobby Gentry, or Gentry, perhaps. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Which is a pretty chill, kind of sad song about Billy Joe killing himself by jumping off a bridge from the few verses of the song I've listened to.
A very cheerful song to listen to on a Tuesday afternoon.
Saturday afternoon.
Well, it's Tuesday today.
It is, but in 1967 it was a Saturday.
Well, I'm pretty sure 1967 had some Tuesdays. I mean, come on.
They didn't invent Tuesday, actually, until the year 1957, which confusingly came after the 60s. It was like a pocket year. It's a pretty decent song. I'll include a wee clip here. It's pretty chill, and the version of it that I have is from an archive thing that BBC... I found it on YouTube, but the BBC apparently lost it, as they lose every piece of footage, for decades until eventually discovering it again along with a bunch of other things. And it's an incredible quality. They must have really worked to get this looking good again.
Now Billy Joe McAllister jumped off the Tallahatchie Bridge. Brother said he recollected when he and Tom and Billy Joe put a frog down my back at the Carroll County Picture Show. And wasn't I talking to him after church last Sunday night? I'll have another piece of apple pie. It don't seem right. I saw him at the sawmill yesterday up on Choctaw Ridge. And now you tell me Billy Joe's jumped off the Tallahatchie Bridge.
Oh yeah, the people who restore all these BBC things do a really great job, because Tomb of the Cybermen alone looks incredible for its age because of the restoration they've done to it. It looks incredible.
Yeah, it does look very, very good. The only thing in Tomb of the Cybermen that I really enjoyed watching were the little scratches of film on the bottom of the screen. I really enjoyed looking at those.
So did I. I don't know why.
But now we move into the largest bit of research that I ended up stumbling upon when researching this day in history. So buckle up. It started off with a sentence. The Principality of Sealand is established, ruled by Prince Paddy Roy Bates. And I went, what? What is the Principality of Sealand? Some people may know. I was talking to my brother about it, and he already knew what this was, but I had no idea what it was, and I found this very fascinating. The Principality of Sealand is an unrecognized micronation that claims HM Fort Rose, also known as Rose Tower, an offshore platform in the North Sea, approximately 12 kilometers off the coast of Suffolk, as its territory. Bates seized Ruff's Towers from a group of pirate radio broadcasters in 1967 with the intention of setting up his own station there. In 1978, it got invaded by mercenaries, which we'll go into a bit later on, but they managed to repel the attack. And in 1977, Bates introduced a constitution for Sealand, followed with a national flag, a national anthem, a currency, and passports. So it's like this platform of concrete that was used to stop boats coming in or something like that. And he's like, this is a nation. This is now a whole country. It's like just off the coast of England, and it's not been recognized by any country formally. It's still within the borders of the UK, but it's this tiny independent quote-unquote nation. In 1978, Alexander Ochbach, who describes himself as Prime Minister of Sealand, hired several German and Dutch mercenaries to lead an attack on Sealand while Bates and his wife were in England. This is apparently from an unreliable source, according to Wikipedia, where I got all this information from. But the rest of it does have enough references that I reckon that it's probably true enough. Ochbach Ochbach had disagreed with Bates over plans to turn Sealand into a luxury hotel and casino with fellow German and Dutch businessmen. They stormed the platform with speedboats, personal watercrafts, and helicopters and took Bates' son Michael hostage. Michael was able to take Sealand back and capture Achenbach and the mercenaries using weapons stashed on the platform. Achbach, a German lawyer who held a Sealand passport, was charged with treason against Sealand and was held unless he paid DM 75,000, which equates to more than £23,000 or 35,000 US dollars. Germany then sent a diplomat from its London embassy to Sealand to negotiate for the release of Achenbach. And then Roy Bates eventually relented after several weeks of negotiations. And then he used Germany sending a diplomat to Sealand as a way of being like, Germany recognizes Sealand as an independent nation. They recognize us as a country because they sent a diplomat to us.
Damn.
It gets wilder. Sealand sells quote-unquote fantasy passports, which are not valid for international travel at all and not recognized by any nation, obviously. In 1997, the Bates family revoked all the Sealand passports that they sold, including those that they had themselves and had issued for the past 22 years, due to the realization that an international money laundering scheme had appeared by using the sale of fake Sealand passports to finance drug trafficking and money laundering from Russia and Iraq. The ringleaders of the operation, who were based in Madrid, had ties with various groups in Germany, including the rebel Sealand government in exile established by Achenbach after the attempted 1978 coup. They had used fake Sealandic diplomatic immunity and license plates, and they were even reported to have sold 4,000 fake Sealandic passports to Hong Kong citizens for an estimated $1,000 each. Michael Bates stated in 2016 that Sealand was receiving hundreds of passports for applications for passports every day, which is it became this giant international money laundering scheme, which is just insane.
Yeah, that is insane. That's a lot.
In 2015, Bates said that Sealand's population is quote normally like 2 people.
Sounds like my kind of country.
Yep. And in 1987, the UK extended its territorial waters from 3 to 12 nautical miles, which Sealand then became a part of the British territorial waters. In the opinion of law academic John Gibson, there is little chance Sealand could be recognized by a nation because it is in fact a man-made structure. That's
insane.
A very brief history of Sealand, and yeah, it's just an incredibly strange story that I would love to see either a documentary or a film about. Like,
I'm sure there must have been a film about it, because it vaguely sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
I had never heard of it. I'm sure there's definitely been maybe 1 or 2 documentaries. I don't know about a fully fictionalized film, though. I would quite like to see a fully fictionalized film.
Yeah, what a wild story.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But with that is all the notes I have on this day in history for Saturday. I closed my notes.
September 2nd, 1967.
Yes, for Saturday the 2nd of September, 1967. So let's move into the writer's deep dive, shall we, Scott?
Oh yeah, well firstly, we're going to just go over notes in general. This is Matt Smith's favourite episode. This is the first episode Matt Smith watched when preparing for the role of the 11th Doctor, and it became his favourite. And I think you can very much see it just in Patrick Troughton's performance. You can see that Matt Smith not copied, but
took inspiration.
Yeah, he took inspiration for a lot of Patrick Troughton's performance, especially the hand gestures, the way he rubs his hands.
The bow tie.
Yes. So yeah, this was thought to have disappeared by the BBC by around the late 70s. It just completely vanished, and then it was found in Hong Kong in 1991, which is sadly a practice that ruined a lot of Doctor Who, because most of Patrick Troughton's era is completely gone.
Yeah, and they remake it now with kind of iffy looking, but animation episodes, which I'm glad that they're making them at least, because it's like a chance for them to live on. But yeah, the animation isn't superb.
Have you seen the animation for The Web of Fear?
Is that the newest one?
Yes.
I think so, and it was terrible.
It really is. So what they did, they used to do it in 2D animation, just animating it like a normal cartoon. But for this Web of Fear release, they decided to do motion capture to make the movements more realistic. But if you've seen the motions, it doesn't look realistic at all, does it? It looks really bad.
It's pretty rough. It reminds me of, speaking of bad animation and Doctor Who have like a YouTube web series with Daleks.
Yes.
And it looks atrocious. Like, it's for like younger kids, I think, but the animation is absolutely hideous on that show.
Doctor Who doesn't have a good history with animation. Like, there's 2 David Tennant animated specials, and the first one was 2D and it looks decent enough, but the second one is 3D and it looks like a bad PS1 video game. It looks really bad.
Yeah, it's probably just the BBC not giving the correct money to, hire out decent animation studios, because it's Doctor Who needs to give it a budget. But yeah, the animation's not very good.
But yes, our writers for this episode are Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis. Kit Pedler was a British medical scientist, parapsychologist, and science fiction author, which he's a science man of a combination, which is interesting because Doctor Who doesn't really go for the science that much these days, and I think hiring a scientist to advise for scripts is a interesting thought.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting take, and the fact that he's a science fiction author as well means that at least he'll be able to give some credency to some of the sci-fi mumbo jumbo that you say, like.
Because Tomb of the Cybermen is just riddled with all these math problems and just logic puzzles, and it's like, this is insane. It's going over my head. I can't understand a single word we're saying.
It is full of a lot of we've got to flip these dials in the correct order to open this door, like.
But yeah, Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis both created the Cybermen, and I think together they wrote the scripts for the first 3 appearances and submitted the story for the next 2. Now, between October 1966 and December 1968, there were 5 Cybermen stories. So that's in a little over 2 years, there was 5 Cybermen stories. This is because the Daleks were kind of written out of the show at this point, because Terry Nation wanted the Daleks to be in a movie. He wanted them to be like more independent from the show, so they had to rely on a new villain. and they really hoped that Cybermania would take off, but it never really did. But I think Cybermania should have took off. I really like Cybermen.
I think it definitely took off when they brought them back in the David Tennant episode with the new alternate universe Cybermen, because I remember loving the Cybermen when I was a kid when they first appeared, and I had a Cyberman Halloween costume. Like they were everywhere when they came back in the new show. But yeah,
I have a Cyberman piggy bank that I still have to this day.
yeah, it's a shame that they never took off as much. I think some of that probably plays into the costumes not as good as the Daleks. Like it's not good looking at all. But
I kind of like these costumes because they look like they're scrap metal or something. And in the first appearance, we just have cloths over their faces, and it's just like, I think it adds to the creepiness. Whereas the new designs are a bit too robotic, and you forget there's a human underneath there.
Yeah, I think they're dated. I like them for the nostalgia, and I like them when they bring them in New Who, and they're like, look, it's an old Cyberman head, ha ha ha. But I much prefer I prefer David Tennant's era of Cyberman. The big clunky robot machines, I really like those guys. Not a big fan of the Peter Capaldi and Matt Smith era Cybermen, the slimmer, sleeker looking ones.
Yeah, there was a point in the Matt Smith episodes where Cyberman basically became Iron Man. And it's just like, I think it was that Neil Gaiman episode. It really looks like Iron Man.
Episode that Neil Gaiman famously was really upset about.
Yes, I don't blame him.
It was supposed to be a two-parter, and then he was forced to make it into one episode. Yeah,
it really doesn't. After the first one, I'm like, he should have had more creative freedom, I think.
He did write some great episodes of Doctor Who, though. The TARDIS becoming a person.
Yes.
Great episode.
One of the best of Matt Smith's era. But Jerry Davis, the man who was more responsible for getting the script perfect, he previously wrote for Coronation Street before this, which is our favorite show. We really love Coronation Street. Let's do a podcast.
Yeah, we're Coronation Street heads, as we like to be called, or cornies. We also accept being called cornies, but do not call us street fans, because cornies are death. I love the episode where they go to the pub and then domestic abuse happens.
Oh yes, that's my favorite one. But yeah, Jerry Davis was the script editor from 1966 to 1967, and he's most notable for creating the Cybermen, obviously, but also Jamie, the companion in this episode, who lasted most of the Second Doctor's era, apart from his first episode. Jamie is a pretty interesting companion, I think. I really like him. He's from the Highlands in like the 1800s, so he's not aware of all the technology and all that, which is an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and he's Scottish because he wears a kilt all the time.
Yes, but the actor himself isn't Scottish, and I think
he does a decent enough job with the Scottish accent.
I think he really does good. I think that's one of the few Scottish accents I kind of like, whereas the other ones I kind of cringe at. I'm like, oh, please don't do it.
Yeah, it can be a hard accent for people to do.
But he's really good. So Jerry Davis was going to write Revenge of the Cybermen in 1975, but his script wound up heavily being rewritten by Robert Holmes, which is sad. But Big Finish recently did a rendition of his original script, so we'll probably talk about that someday and compare the two.
Big Finish, they'll do anything and everything, my god.
So sadly, Jerry Davis died in 1991, which was a few months before this episode was found again, which is a real shame, because I think he probably should have deserved recognition for creating such an iconic episode. Yeah,
it's a big shame. It's like John Pertwee dying just before the film releases, the Doctor Who film. It's these sad little tragedies where they just missed out on seeing something cool.
So together, Jerry Davis and Kit Pedler, after Doctor Who, they wrote for a TV show called Doomwatch, which was like a groundbreaking sci-fi series on BBC One that dealt with very likely ecological and technological fears. Like, topics included Should genetic engineering be allowed? Effects of air pollution from airplanes and climate change. And it was a huge show for the BBC, and I looked on BritBox for this, and surprisingly enough, BritBox don't have it.
Gasp.
I would be fascinated to actually watch this show, because I'm very interested in finding out how the 1970s predicted today.
Gotta tweet BritBox, get them to add it. Get them to
really
add it.
do. But Doomwatch was produced by Terry. Going off a tangent here, but it comes back, I promise. Doomwatch was produced by Terence Dudley, who also wrote on Doctor Who briefly between 1982 and 1983, and he wrote the TV special K9 and Company, which I can't wait to watch next month.
I'm very excited to watch K9 and Company.
Just from the intro alone, you know it's going to be bad.
Yep. You have that to look forward to. I will not show you the intro to that show just yet, but believe me when I say it is worth the wait.
It is insane how that intro got made. But anyway, between season 4 and 5, there was like a 4-month wait for episodes, which was at this time the longest wait in between episodes. And apparently kids got so agitated about the lack of Doctor Who, they wrote to the BBC and threatened to kill someone. They're just like,
Jesus.
What would they do today when we have to wait like 2 years for seasons sometimes? Like, what would they do?
Yeah. Well, the difference today is nobody watches TV.
True. Like when a new season drops today, I think we're like, oh, a new season of Doctor Who just dropped a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
Nobody noticed.
catch up. Like,
but yeah, that's about it. But the budget for this story, which is interesting to find out what the budget is. The budget for this story is £22,000, which equals £350,000 today, which is
it's a pretty big budget, not a terrible budget.
Yeah, but it's still really small. We had to do a lot of...
Considering it's a giant sci-fi show, you want a little bit more than that. But I think they use the money well. Like, it looks pretty decent.
It really does look great, and I think it really holds up a lot. But yeah,
it has quite a big cast as well going on it. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces.
And also, this story had like 6 million viewers when it first aired, which today, if you got 6 million viewers, people would be like blaming the show for being woke. It's like, I'm sorry, but how does that equate?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But yeah, that's it for the facts.
Awesome. Well, on this episode, if I didn't say previously, we're going to be covering the first 2 parts of this story, and next week we'll be back with the next 2 parts. But let us dive into part 1 of the Tomb of the Cybermen.
Now that we're all here, I think we'd better take stock of the situation. This appears to be a dead end. The only way out appears to be through that hatch.
Are there no doors?
No, apart from the entrance.
And the other 2, of course. 2 other doors?
Oh, yes. One in that section, and one in that section over there. Activated, I imagine, by this simple logical system here. Here we are, I think. Yes, splendid. A simple logical gate.
The episode opens, as every episode of Doctor Who opens, with the theme song and the intro. And what do you think about this theme song and intro, Scott?
I think most Doctor Who theme songs and intros are fantastic. But what I'm curious about is how you think about Patrick Troughton's face in here. Because I know you've had a problem with faces in the past when we covered Pertwee and Davison. So what did you think of his face here?
Honestly, it didn't bother me as much as Davidson and Pertwee did. And I think that is because it's on screen for like a second. Like, it is like... The intro for this episode specifically, I don't know if it was the same for all Patrick Troughton episodes. The intro is like 10 seconds long. It is super short.
It's so short. I don't. When I watched the first 2 parts, it just threw me off how short the intro was. Like,
yeah,
wow.
Like usually I really like the intro for Doctor Who because it gets me excited for the show. I'm like, yeah, and then this one it was like, yeah, oh, we're in the episode, okay, right? Like,
it's like. You expect intros to get shorter these days because that's 'cause there's no intro anymore in most shows these days, but to think about this intro here is like kind of predicting the future and how short attention spans are.
Yeah, it's a real short intro, and I think that's why his face didn't bother me that much. Also, the way that it transforms, where he's got like several different eyes briefly, didn't bother me. And then like it's his lovely, charming, smiling face, and it slowly pans zooms towards the camera. It doesn't like it's not coming at you like what Davidson's face was. Like
yeah, I love
it's not as large as Pertwee's was. It's a pretty good use of his face appearing.
Yeah, I love how his face kind of like materializes as if it's like a TARDIS out of this like psychedelic opening.
Yeah, it's very cool. And what do you think about the logo for this era of Doctor Who?
It's a pretty standard logo, not as good as the one that came after it in like a Pertwee and Paul McGann movie, but it's a pretty standard logo.
I quite like it. It's like quite sleek looking. It's like just it's really plain. It's just typeface. Like it's just typeface, white text, Doctor Who. But it looks very smart and neat. And I'm like, oh, that's quite a nice little logo there.
You're very keen on logos, aren't you?
They're an important part. The episode opens to a shot of the most wrinkly looking TARDIS in the world. And I assume this is because it's a miniature.
Yes. This is on the planet Skaro, by the way, because the last episode ended off with the Daleks.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering why Victoria seems so sad in this episode, it's because her dad just got killed by Daleks, which is very upsetting, I imagine.
Yeah, it's very interesting because this is the opener for season 5. Like, this is season 5, episode 1. And to have a season just open immediately where the last season left off with no recap, no nothing, it's like, oh, okay, I guess this is what's happening.
But we do get an interesting gist of what the show is about. It's like it's also welcoming new viewers. Because Patrick Troughton literally explains what the plot of the show is, what the TARDIS is, and all that.
Yeah, it's a pretty clever way of doing it. I was just like, oh, there's a new companion, okay. And then the Patrick Troughton explaining everything worked out pretty well. And then also Jamie appears out of nowhere. He just kind of walks into frame in one shot. We don't get an establishing to show that he's in the TARDIS. He's just there. But is Victoria from like the Victorian ages? Is that why she's in this fancy dress thing?
Yeah, I think she's from the 19th century. So yeah, it's also why she's called Victoria.
Yeah. So
very creative name.
So this version of the Doctor, if Jamie's from like the 1400s or something,
yeah,
he's just traveling around with people from the past. That's quite an interesting concept, rather than like a modern day person.
Next season, he does get Zoe from the future, which is an also interesting concept.
Yeah, it's like something I would like to see in New Who is traveling with someone who's not from present day.
So would I, and Zoe being in from the future is almost the same intellect as the Doctor, which is an interesting relationship, I thought. I kind of want more of that.
Yeah, it's really cool, and definitely it's something they've not explored in New Who at all, because every companion is a young female who ends up falling in love with the Doctor, or
especially Graham.
Yeah, Graham was the worst for it, man. But in this scene, they talk about the TARDIS and how it flies, and Victoria's unbelieving, and then they have a discussion that I found pretty interesting, and does come back to play in episode 3, which we'll cover next week, where Victoria asks the Doctor how old he is, and he's like, "Oh God, in Earth years, I'm like 400 and something," which again is something that's probably retconned at this point, because the Doctor's age is all over the goddamn place.
This is the first time the Doctor's actually revealed his age on screen, which is interesting. So it's been 5 years for viewers. We still don't know his home planet. We just know his age at this point, and he's an alien who can shapeshift, and that's all we know about the Doctor.
Yeah, they don't even find out he's got 2 hearts till John Pertwee. Like, they're really, really slow at teasing out who the Doctor is and where he comes from and what he's like.
But nowadays we know everything about the Doctor's past. Like,
yeah, that's the interesting thing, and I think maybe one of the reasons, I'm going to bring it up again, the Timeless Child. One of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of the Timeless Child, it's because it ruins the mystery of the Doctor, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, the joy of the Doctor is he or she, they, are this mysterious alien traveler who you don't fully understand. And, like, they seem human, but there's just things about them that aren't quite human. And having that mystery is one of the compelling reasons to watch the show. But if we know the Doctor has this secret past and they're the key to regeneration and they've been around since the dawn of time and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah, who cares?
The title of the show is literally called Doctor Who. I mean...
Yeah, the only thing that's still a mystery in Doctor Who is what the Doctor's name is. And that has to always be a mystery. If they ever do that, it's going to ruin it. Like... There's nothing they could do that wouldn't be underwhelming.
Like, when we covered the Doctor Who movie, we discussed about how the original idea was to explore the Doctor's past, and he's like a family heir, and he's going to be king of Gallifrey, and it's like, way too much. Just keep the mystery alive. That's all you need.
Yeah. But we then cut to the desert planet of, what was it called? Tebius? Telos. Where we get the title screen for the episode, "The Tomb of the Cybermen," which I thought was interesting. It's like the first part where they're in the TARDIS was almost like a cold open if the intro wasn't there before. You know, it's like establishing character and setting up the mystery of, oh, we're traveling this way, and then the episode begins and we get the title card.
The opening was actually shot in advance. I'm not sure why, but it was also shot on film, whereas the rest of the episode is shot on tape. And I'm not sure why they shot the opening in advance. I guess because they might have wanted to add it on to the end of the Dalek story of the last season. I'm not sure.
Maybe it was like they had to cut it out of the end of last season because they didn't have enough time in the episode, and they were like, oh, we'll just stick it in the first part next season or something strange. But yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, I think the original plan was to have this episode take place at the end of season 4, so I guess that must be, I don't know. It's a very strange decision, but it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah. We then see a very large gentleman standing on a hill and getting shouted at by a bunch of who we find out are archaeologists and I think like soldiers and guards and whatever. And the large gentleman is a guard for one of the lady who ends up being bad. There's a lot of characters in this episode.
There is, yes. But yeah, obviously this shot was shot in a quarry, and I think it looks pretty good. It looks like an alien planet to me.
Yeah, it does. It does look like an alien planet. I think a lot of that helps is that it's in black and white.
Yes.
So you have no idea what color the land's on. You can't quite make out the formations of the rocks properly. It really helps the landscape look alien.
Yeah, because when the show shifted to color, it was a lot more obvious that it was shot in like a quarry, because all you could see was just brown. It's like, oh, they're shooting in that quarry again. But yeah, there is quite a little bit of racism in this episode.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the large gentleman who actually opens the story properly is a black man, a very large black man, who is the servant to the rich white lady, and he doesn't say a lot of lines. He's like what's the word I'm looking for here? Like I don't want to say savage, but he's like from like a tribal people, and he's like big and muscly, and he's there to protect, and he doesn't say a lot of words, and it's like, this is the only black character in the episode, is it?
Originally, the idea was to have him be a deaf person with a hearing aid, but I guess somewhere along the lines that got dropped out, and that explains why he doesn't have too much lines, which I think
him being a deaf person is way better than him being dense. Like,
he really comes across as just a servant, which is really unfortunate. And also, when we're speaking about the villains, the main woman who Toberman is a servant to, is also kind of a racist caricature, because she was told to have like a vague Eastern accent, and in the makeup department her face was painted darker, which is pretty problematic, I would say. And also the other guy with her is from Cyprus, and he was supposed to be, he's from like the Hammer horror movies, where he's like a European kind of from Cyprus. He's like the villain in a lot of. He's essentially the foreign nasty in a lot of Hammer horror movies, and he was just cast for this role because of that, which is, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty great, isn't it? It's an interesting topic because I think it's definitely got its place in film history as like an interesting thing to look in on, like the foreign villain and the darkening of skin to represent things. And it's definitely not going to fly today. But I don't necessarily agree with getting rid of it either, like what Netflix and things have done, where they've scrubbed some episodes that feature things like blackface and things like that. But yeah, it's a hard one to do, and you could look at it. It's definitely not the way they did it because this was the 60s. They were just doing it because this is what everyone did. But if you were to bring back this foreign villain sort of thing, you could look at it in like a sense of like it's an homage to cinema of old and things like that. And so that's a way that you could continue something like this today. But yeah, it's not something that really goes over well with a more modern audience.
I'm honestly surprised BritBox doesn't have any kind of warning about the mild racism in this episode. I don't think the racism is intentional either. It's just the mindset of 1967. But when you
the one thing that's good about it is the black servant character. At no point does anybody call him black or treat him like a black man. The doctor is never disrespectful to him, and he actually ends up being like the savior of the episode. So he does have this very nice arc where he ends up saving everybody's life. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, but when you want to look at Star Trek, which was around this exact same time, it's another science fiction show, but people are equal more, I think. But it's a shame to just see Doctor Who, as progressive as it is these days, kind of just see his past, and it's just like, yeah.
Yeah, it's not far off George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. But,
yes.
The first ever zombie film where the main character is a black man, and they one of the first ever feature films to feature a black man as the character without it being a race film. Like it is, he just happens to be black, and it doesn't play into the plot at all. And so I think we're at the very, very slow turning point in cinema where things start to become a little bit more equal. And are we there yet? Probably not, but who knows?
But yeah, going back to Doomwatch, which we mentioned was by the writers of this episode, they cast the black dude in an episode of Doomwatch, and his name, and I'm quoting it here, his name in that show was Negro, and this was like, yes, this was like maybe 4 years after this episode, 5 years after this episode, which is kind of not great.
Yeah, not great at all. Maybe that's one of the reasons why BritBox doesn't want to add it to
possibly
the streaming service. Just yeah, but again, I think it's interesting from like a look back on why was this wrong mindset rather than a look back and glorifying it sort of thing. It's
Oh yes, of course, yeah.
I don't agree with the disregarding of cinema history, but
neither do I. But as on the whole, I think this episode is very interesting just watching to see how TV production has changed throughout the years. There's so much to talk about just in this episode alone.
Yeah. But our archaeologists end up blowing a massive hole in the quarry. Like it's quite a hefty looking explosion. And at first they don't see anything and they're disappointed. But then, some doors. They find doors. Doors to the Tomb of the Cybermen.
And then we get to your favorite part, the part where they've run up the hill.
Yeah, so they spot the doors, and then they're like, well, "Let's all go. We've got to go up to the doors." And then we open up. We cut to a very wide shot where everyone's at the bottom of the hill, and it literally, the shot lasts like 15-20 seconds as we're watching every character climb up from the bottom of the hill to the top. And there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people climbing this hill, and we do not cut until the 10th person has passed the frame.
But to be fair, this was like 1967, and I think this whole episode takes place in real time, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
because a lot of classic Doctor Who did not want the cut because it was expensive, so they kept it as like a stage play almost, rather than a proper TV episodes. And I think you get that in kind of like the performances and the staging and all that.
Very much so. We then cut to a shot that must be in studio with a either a matte background that they've added in post, or it is a painting or like a piece of cloth with a photo on it, where everyone's looking at the doors and they're supposedly still in the archaeology site. And I actually think it looked pretty good. I didn't notice this until just now, looking back on the episode. Like, it's pretty well done considering some of the in studio exterior shots they've done in classic Doctor Who.
Yeah, it looks pretty solid, but you can tell it's just a background. But yeah, the lady mentions that £50 for the first person to open these doors. Now that's £770 today, which isn't bad. I would open those doors. I would give it a try.
Yeah, I would do that for 700 quid.
But you know, I would probably let somebody else try first, because what happens
She never pays the doctor.
True, she doesn't.
Although the doctor doesn't quite open them. The black guy whose name we need to find out. I don't know what his character's name is.
His name is TOBERMAN.
Yeah, TOBERMAN does open it. She never pays TOBERMAN the money.
She never pays the guy who gets electrocuted either. Like,
he's a bit harder to pay. But yeah, a guy goes to open the doors and immediately gets electrocuted to death. Which I thought was pretty good. I really liked the musical sting. The musical sting that comes here really reminded me of like classic film. Like, it didn't even feel like it was like, oh, this is like a film, like an old school 60s film, where it's like da-da-da. It's very cool.
Oh yeah, they just took all these music from the archive, and I think the music works really well, especially Cyberman music, which is really eerie, I think.
We then hear the TARDIS, what's the word I'm looking for? Appearing, essentially. We hear the whirring of the TARDIS as it lands near them, and I love the sound effect of the TARDIS. It sounds almost identical to what it sounds like nowadays.
Yeah, it's the same sound effect. So yeah, of course,
incredible.
But I really love seeing their perspective of finding the Doctor, because from their perspective, it's a really mysterious thing. They think they're going to be killed or something. Like, we cut to a shot of the guys waiting at a hill, and the Doctor and his companions come around, and there's these long shadows which create like a sense of scariness. It's like, this is really good.
Yeah, there's also an interesting take for Doctor Who, especially at this time. I don't know how often they did it. Quite often we're in the perspective of the TARDIS crew when they land on a planet, and then they come out and they're like, oh, we're here, we just landed on the ship, what's going on? What do you mean this is blah blah blah? Whereas this is, you know, we're with these archaeologists from the start of the episode, from the title card, and then we follow them through, and the Doctor doesn't appear for like 5 minutes, where we establish who everybody is, and then we're like, oh, there's this mysterious figure coming. You know, it's yes. a pretty interesting way of doing it. And then there was a moment where I was like, oh, I really do enjoy Patrick Troughton's performance as the Doctor here, where they point a gun at him and they're like, stop what you're doing, and then he just holds his arms up the like highest he possibly can and goes, well, when you put it that way, I will. And he looks incredible holding his hands up that high. It's such a good, like, cartoonish like movement.
Yeah, Patrick Troughton is just so good in this episode, honestly. Like, I can just imagine Matt Smith in this episode replaced by Patrick Troughton, honestly. Can you?
Yeah, Matt Smith could easily fill this role. You can definitely see the inspiration he took for his Doctor. And, you know, probably a reason why I enjoy both their Doctors. It's a really good way to present the Doctor as a character.
Especially after William Hartnell was the Doctor. He was very grumpy and very slow. Patrick Troughton is the complete opposite. It's wild.
It is night and day performances. I really like William Hartnell's Doctor. I think he's a really solid Doctor, but he brings a totally different energy to the role. They think that the Doctor must be from a rival archaeology company, and that, you know, they can't keep any secrets no matter how hard they try. And they're like, look at the Doctor, he's got archaeologists written all over him. And Patrick Troughton goes, oh really, does it show? And that line just makes me laugh. And it also immediately went, oh, River Song. Like,
I really love his just like snide comments to the archaeologists. It's really good.
Yeah, he's a very funny man. And then this is the part of the episode where half the cast leaves for 3.5 episodes. Because there are, as I said, there are like 10 archaeologists and people that are on the ship, and now there's also the Doctor and his 2 companions. So there are so many people in this scene. So the captain of the spaceship, I guess, goes, well, we're going back to the ship because this is too dangerous. See you later. And then like half of the cast go. It's like, this is a much more manageable number of people. And then they tell the Doctor to go back home, and he's like, I can't go home because of the name that was mentioned, Cybermen, which is a great line where he's like, as soon as that, he's like, oh, there's trouble brewing here. I need to step in.
I really love the musical sting when Cyberman is first mentioned as well. It's like, it really adds to the drama.
And then we get our first, of a few times this happens, struggle for power with the leader of the archaeological dig, where the 2 villains are like constantly pushing and pressuring and telling the Doctor to go away, and then the leader of the archaeological dig has to step up and be like, I'm in charge, you're not in charge, I'm in charge, blah de blah de blah. And this is like the butting of heads between these two, which, you know, plays into a bit of the episode, and it's a very nice little bit of drama within the archaeologists.
Yeah, it really helps to add to her characters, because most of the time I think the side characters are kind of bland, but here you understand their personalities and conflicts immediately.
Very much. What I liked in this scene as well is how it resolves, where the 2 villains are like, yes, of course, you know, we'll respect your authority, Mr. Archaeological Digman, and you know, they're clearly being a little bit facetious, but the Doctor is just like, okay, cool, everything's fine, I'm going to open the doors. The
Doctor spends most of this episode just waiting for arguments to just go away so he can continue the plot. It's really good stuff.
But he places a little scientific doohickey onto the door.
Now, you see, he tries to open the door, but do you see what the problem is when he tries to open the door the first time?
He blocks it with his foot.
Yes.
I never noticed that when I was watching it on the TV, but watching it on my computer screen, he grabs the big handles of the door and starts pulling, but he can't pull. But if you look at where his foot is, he's pushing in with his foot to stop it, it's a pretty clever way to make the doors look heavy, isn't it?
It is, but I kind of feel like the camera should have been just up a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit tighter.
But yeah, it's just good stuff to see that kind of stuff in like 1960s shows. It's like you can just see how they did everything. It's good, it's fun.
Eventually, they get a servant man whose name I have yet again forgotten because I'm terrible at remembering names.
Toberman.
Yes, they get Oberman to open the doors, and he does so with his big muscly muscles. And what I liked about this set design, specifically with the doors, is when he opened the doors, I was 100% expecting them to be really thin and flimsy looking, but they're actually these big, chunky doors. Like, they look like they would be quote-unquote heavy if they were real doors. They're, you know, obviously it's some set design makes it look a little bit light because it's not the best, but the fact that they're big and thick really helps sell you on the idea that these are heavy doors.
Yeah, it's a great decision by the set designers. It really looks authentic. Even if it wobbles just slightly, but, you know, It's 1967, they didn't notice these kind of things when they first watched the episode. But yeah, just the whole set of this, like the drawing of the Cybermen on the side next to the door, it really just does sell you it's a tomb, like a tomb in Egypt. It looks really solid design.
Yeah, it's very cool. And then my favorite bit in the episode happens. So the Doctor is telling everyone to err on the side of caution because they don't know what's going to be inside and to be very careful. And then everyone basically dismisses him and heads on inside, and we're left with just the Doctor and Jamie with Victoria in the background. And the Doctor goes, come on, let's head inside, and clearly forgets who he's with, and he grabs Jamie's hand. They walk like a step before realizing, oh, we're holding hands. Ew, gross. I wasn't expecting it at all, and it's such a great little moment.
So this was improvised during the shoot by Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines because they knew the director wouldn't let that in, but because they didn't do it in rehearsal and they just kept it for the live broadcast, But because these episodes were almost shot as live, there's very minimal cuts. We're watching like a first take here, or a second take. Fraser and Patrick knew they could get away with it, and it's like one of the best moments of the episodes. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's such a fun little moment.
And Fraser Hines and Patrick Troughton are just bloody amazing together, honestly.
Yeah, they are. They're really good. I really enjoyed Jamie in this story as a companion. Victoria doesn't get much to do, unfortunately, but I really enjoyed Jamie.
Yeah, Victoria is just rather kind of in the background, scared of everything.
Yeah, there's a part in this episode specifically, which we'll get to, which ages terribly regarding Victoria and the other female that's on this expedition.
Yeah, so Victoria has fallen behind. She's kind of scared of the whole situation, and we're kind of trying to flatter her on her dress. And then she's like, "Don't you think it's a bit short?" Which was apparently a rather topical joke in 1967, because the fashion was that skirts were getting shorter.
Yeah,
So,
and
yes.
it's like you can see her whole kneecap. It is revealing.
Yeah,
but-
it's not even to her kneecaps either. It's just like
Yeah, I
slightly
like.
underneath.
I really enjoy Patrick Troughton's line. Because Jamie is in a kilt the whole time because he's Scottish, and that's all we wear as Scotsmen. And he's like, "What? Your skirt's not too short. Look at Jamie's." It's a great little line.
Apparently the costume designer was arguing that Jamie should start wearing trousers in this episode, but Fraser Hines just turned around and said, "No, I'm gonna keep wearing kilts," and I think it works better for his character.
Yeah.
Like I cannot imagine Jamie in trousers. It just looks weird.
Yeah, and also, it sets him apart from everyone else. Otherwise, he'd be like another white dude in shirt and trousers. It was like, oh, this guy's in a kilt. He's Scottish.
Yeah. As if the accent isn't a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
But yeah, when the TARDIS crew walk into the place, Victoria says mercy. The original line was wow, but the actors thought mercy sounded more appropriate to her character, which is an interesting move.
It sounds more old timey. Like who sees something and goes, "Oh, mercy me!" Like no one says that anymore. So it's pretty appropriate since she's like from the past. And I again, speaking of Patrick Troughton's performance here, the archaeological leader calls everyone and he's like, "Okay, so this is like a dead end and there's only one door besides the exit." And the doctor walks up and he's like, "Oh yeah, besides the other two doors that are." It's such a great little line.
Again, it's just like he's a background character trying to break into the conversation with the main characters. It's great stuff.
Mm-hmm. And the doctor opens up the Cybermen doors, and he goes on to explain that the doors are based off of logic gates, and the whole area is like being inside of a computer, and so like everything is based off using logic and puzzles and basic mathematics. And it's like when he was like, "I think you call it the OR system, the OR system," and I was like, I have no idea what they were talking about.
Never do I. I didn't even try to look this up because then I'd feel even dumber. You know what I mean? I'm just taking it all at face value. Apparently, it's very accurate and very descriptive.
He pulls the lever, the door opens. I get it. Like,
but I love the idea of just this tomb where there's all these little puzzles that only scientists can solve. It's a really solid concept.
Yeah. And then there's the bit that I was like, oh god damn, this was from the 60s, wasn't it? The lead archaeologist starts splitting people off into teams to go explore one door while the other team goes explore the other, and Victoria's like, well, what about us people that you've left behind, who just so happen to be the two women? And he goes, I think the women should stay behind. I think they should stay here. You are women after all. And it's like, stop.
and then eventually the black man also gets almost stuck with him as well. It's like,
Yeah, they can only go when they're escorted by a man. Like,
yeah, it's. But it does work well in the villain's plan, the lady villain's plan, I think, to keep them separated.
Yeah, it's just that weird thinking that, in the canon of this episode, sometime in the future, we'll all just decide, yeah, the 60s had women's rights, correct?
Yeah.
And then, like, it's like, would we really have the same morals? That I think it's like maybe just a gap in thinking for the writer, where, just assuming everything would be the same as it is in modern day.
Yeah, at least with like Star Trek, if they try to imagine what the future should be like and what it could be like and all that.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's just like, oh yeah, the year's 2020 or 2067 and women are obviously not strong enough.
Traditional gender roles still play. Yeah.
Which again is fascinating because it's just how nobody would think a second time about this in like 1967. Nobody would think differently.
Yeah. Can't wait in like 50 years time when all the stuff that's in Doctor Who nowadays, we look back and go, Jesus Christ, how did we ever think this was okay?
But again, it could be a lot worse. I think in terms of like 1960s British television, this is fairly progressive.
Yeah, it's definitely progressive for the time, but it hasn't aged. It's aged well. It's just like every now and then there's a bit that reminds you it's from the 60s.
Yeah.
And then there's a great line just as the scene's wrapping up where the leader of the expedition goes to the doctor and is like, do you want to talk more about these logic puzzle things you were talking about? And the doctor's like, no, I think we should let Mr. Klieg, who is the villain, use some of his archaeological skills to figure out this room, and then like that guy walks off to go use his archaeological skills, and the doctor very, very sarcastically goes, I love to watch the experts at work.
I love him so much in this episode. It's just a really good performance. I love how he's just quietly the smartest person in the room. He doesn't say anything to their faces about being extra super smart. He's just very snide and
he's very sarcastic about it. Yeah. We then go to the big room where Victoria, the villain, and Balding Man, whose name I don't know is, where it's the room where they regenerate Cybermen. We find out with this big like laser cannon thing. And the guy in it, the guy that's here, the balding archaeologist, is again super rude, especially to Victoria. Like he's looking at stuff and going over things and writing things down. And Victoria's like asking, he's like, "Oh, you're in my way. Go over there." It's like, Jesus Christ. Okay.
The second they figure out that it's a machine for the Cybermen to revitalize themselves, Victoria goes immediately inside of it.
She's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll climb in. And the interesting
like the fucking gates were electrified and somebody died, and she's like, "Oh, I'll just touch this thing that creates Cybermen, sure."
Yeah, and also a thing that I don't know if it's still canon or if because we see the Cybermen later on in this story, but the revitalization thing, and even Victoria makes mention of it. The Cybermen are like 7 foot tall.
Yes.
And are they that tall in the episode? I don't remember.
The main Cyberman is like 6'5", but he also has an extra thing on top of his head to make him like
big brain. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the other Cybermen are just slightly over 6 feet, which is they're probably massive compared to most people.
The idea of like 7 foot, 8 foot tall Cybermen though is something that they could probably bring back, because Cybermen nowadays are like regular people size, but imagine giant Cybermen.
Yes. Or remember that Christmas special where the Cyberman was like 200 feet tall?
Yeah, and it was dumb.
And Stephen Moffat had to retcon most of Russell's era because of that. Yeah, but Victoria is like, oh, revitalizing is just what I need. And then she steps right inside of it.
Yeah.
Really?
It's funny. It's a fun misunderstanding of the term revitalization, because to her, from the Victorian ages, it's like, oh yes, a cup of tea and like a nice nap. Whereas obviously they mean like regenerating injured metal soldiers. But she has no idea what a Cyberman is. Like,
yeah, she's not the most intelligent person throughout this entire episode, is she?
Then we cut to Jamie, and there was a great scene where they describe why everything's lit up, but you can't see light bulbs. which is I thought was a fun thing that they really didn't need to explain, but they say that it was, what's the exact term? Cosmic rays bombarding radium something another, something like that, and Jamie just goes, "Oh, aye, yeah, that one." Like,
And then he picks up a caterpillar, which turns out to be a cybermat. It's the first time we've seen a cybermats.
yeah, and it's interesting. I think they look good in this episode at a distance. Like when he's holding, when in the wide shot, when he's holding it in his hand, it looks like the modern day versions of the cybermats, where it's like, oh yeah, it's like a weird mouse thing with a robot tail, and then we cut to the close up of it, and it is quite funny looking.
Cybermats were primarily just created because they wanted to create toys out of them, and that is an interesting toy to make, I think.
It
like
would look so much better. It doesn't need eyes. The thing that makes it look so silly is the eyeballs it has.
Well, yeah, the Cybermats in this episode were supposed to be controlled by remote control in rehearsals, but the cameras interfered with the remote control and we just went haywire. So instead, they just pulled them on little strings.
It worked well. I didn't notice a single string. I'll keep an eye out for it. But yeah, I didn't notice a string.
But yeah, I imagine a lot of kids would have had this on their Christmas list 1967. I certainly would. But yeah, you'll notice there's quite a bit of mistakes in line delivery in this episode, because one of the people say, for an archaeologist speaking to the doctor, you're curiously lacking in curiosity. And the line was singularly lacking in curiosity. So I
prefer curiously lacking in curiosity, though. It's a more fun play on words.
Yeah, but it is an interesting thing that we couldn't stop recording to get the line right, just because it was almost shot as live, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And also in this scene, the scene that we're talking about is the doctor, the lead the lead archaeologist, and the villain. And they for like a solid minute, it seems like they're just talking about computer programming and codes and computer logic and mathematics. And I just went, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, same here.
There's even a bit where the doctor corrects the math work that one of the guys has been doing. It's like, okay.
Like for my notes in this part, I wrote down, I hate maths. That's all I wrote down. But I love how the doctor is like given hints on how to solve the math problems, and he's like, "Oh no, please don't solve the math problem, please don't."
My assumption here is the doctor sees the math problem. He's like, "Oh, I can fix this. I know how to fix this. Here's how you fix this. Wait, please don't fix it." Like he needed to correct the wrong maths, but like he knows he shouldn't.
It's so great. I love it. Because we do forget that the Doctor is really, really smart sometimes. Like, I think Modern Who kind of focuses too much on the quirky aspects of the Doctor.
Yeah, I think that, that's one of the reasons why I loved Peter Capaldi's Doctor, specifically Professor Doctor, when he goes back to like writing on chalkboards and doing maths and talking about paradoxes and using his brain to solve things. And he's still a bit quirky and a bit weird, but yeah, I think smart Doctor is always fun to see rather than quirky romantic lead Doctor.
Yeah, I like how in this episode you kind of get surprised by him, because Patrick Troughton is a quirky character. He's an odd fella, but when he kind of just comes out with all these mathematical equations, it's like, wow, this is surprising. This is unexpected.
Yeah, it's very good. And we then go to Victoria, who, after being told not to climb into the rejuvenating machine, climbs into the rejuvenating machine for no reason. She's been told, don't climb in there, it's dangerous. And she's like, oh, I'm going to climb in there. And then the villain lady runs over and slams the door by pulling a lever, trapping Victoria in the machine. And it's peril. Oh no, but it's very silly.
Yes, apparently the actress who plays Victoria was claustrophobic, so this is a nightmare to film.
Yikes.
Yes. Apparently, later on when we're both knocking on the door, apparently that's not her inside because we had to get another dude to come in. That's how bad it got for her.
And then we cut to Jamie and the archaeologist he's with, and they're fiddling with buttons on a control, which activate like a hypnosis wall thing, where they're like, oh, good goodness. And then I really enjoyed their scenes together where they're like, don't look at it. Okay, let's try another one. Where they just keep fiddling with the logic gate to see the different hypnosis things that appear.
Like, if I was them, I would just get the fuck out of there. But yeah, we cut back to Villain Lady, and we're trying to get the door open. And you can see Patrick Troughton just in the shadow at the doorway. Did you ever notice that?
I did not. I did not notice him there at all.
But yeah, but I think that was a mistake because he was just trying to get ready for his next cue. And there he is, just standing there.
Yeah, but then the archaeologist leaves and Villain Lady's left alone with Victoria, and she's like, haha, I'm going to kill you now. And she starts pulling on the levers as Patrick Troughton slowly creeps up on her and then catches her in the act and stops her and frees Victoria. And it's like, yay, doctor.
I do love the hypnosis, though. It's a pretty interesting effect, too.
Yeah, it's a pretty good looking circle of thing, but you know that's what Doctor Who's best at, is weird circle moving things. You've seen the intro. And then just another line that made me really like Jamie. He's talking with the archaeologist about what the hypnosis machine could be used for, and the archaeologist is like, oh, you know, it's we've read about something like this on Earth, where by looking at it you get trained to see the hidden target that's inside it. And what's the exact line here? Hang on. Yeah, there's a subliminal center to the target, which you get trained to see by the hypnosis machine. And then Jamie's like, oh, hi. Wait, what? Like, it's a great little line. Really enjoy him as a companion.
And then the scientist dude just leaves Jamie in charge of the controls. That's not going to end well, is it? But yeah, the Doctor helps get Victoria out of the tomb, and then she gets out and starts crying, which not a good first episode for Victoria as a companion, is it?
Yeah, you don't really get to know her, and she just, you know, acts stupid, does nothing, and cries the whole time, and it's a bit disappointing, considering she's the new companion.
But again, sadly, the viewpoint at the time was Victoria was just there for the dads to look at. That's literally what Fraser Hines says to the actress in the audio commentary. It's like, oh, okay.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, but then he also says, I'm there for the girls to look at, which I guess, I don't know.
At least it's equally sexist.
I guess. Because Jimmy doesn't get too much to do in this episode either, but at least he has like little comedic moments with the Doctor and with the other scientist dude.
Yeah, and he doesn't act super stupid either. Like, he's not climbing into a machine that he's been told not to climb into just for the sake of climbing into it. Like,
you can tell he's a little bit more intelligent than Victoria is presented as.
And we then cut back to the scientist, the lead archaeologist, and the villain, where they're talking about, oh, we should just give up, or it looks like we can't get through, and they talk more science mumbo-jumbo stuff, and they discover, like, oh, there must be another logic problem to get through the door. Yes, aha. And then there was, like, a bit of acting from the villain that really made me laugh, where it was very, like, staged almost, where he goes, oh, what could it be? Just that line delivery got me.
But again, this is like very much a stage production rather than a TV production. This is like in a multi-camera setup, and it's only done once. And I guess most of these actors probably were stage trained.
Oh yeah. It was how most actors were trained back then. Like, you go watch any film from the 60s. Well, most films from the 60s, and a lot of the acting and performances are like this. They're loud and big and not quite real, but you can still believe it. It's just the style.
How insane is it that this is still the same show as we get today? It's like they didn't reboot it, they just continued it, and it's like they ignored all the theatrics of the last 26 years, and it's insane.
You know what it really reminds me of about a show that has just continued on forever?
Yes.
Coronation Street, our favorite show.
But at least Coronation Street feels like it's exactly the same show, like not too much different. But with Doctor Who, it's more cinematic, which is
It feels
insane just to think about.
It feels way different now. It's interesting looking at it because there are like moments in Classic Who that happen where you're like, oh, that's New Who right there. Like tiny little brief moments. And I think, a lot of credit goes to Russell T Davies for grabbing those moments and making that the show, because those moments are usually the best parts of the Classic Who era.
Yeah, Russell T Davies did such an excellent job of just reinventing the show for a new audience.
And then another great line from Jamie. We're in the hypnotization, that's a hard word to say, in the hypnotization room again, and the Doctor comes charging in and he's like, Jamie, don't touch those controls. And Jamie just goes, I already have.
But yeah, this is probably one of the most iconic cliffhangers, because it's just so unexpected. A Cyberman just flies straight out at the camera.
Yeah, a Cyberman comes flying out at the camera, a gun appears from the wall, and then the archaeologist who's been with Jamie this whole time dies. He gets shot, and then we zoom into the Cyberman's face, and that's where the episode ends.
And it all happens in like 10 seconds. It is just a total whiplash. It's great.
Yeah, assuming you were to watch it when it aired, it would really make you think, oh no, the Cyberman has come here, like the Cybermen are back. With the more modern eye, you can see it's a puppet. It's like a static guy. But that, it is a very good cliffhanger for the episode, I thought.
It really is. I can just imagine being a kid in 1967, just jumping out of my seat to this ending.
Yeah, especially the credits. They roll over the frozen image of the Cyberman the whole time, whereas other credits, they fade to black in some of the cliffhangers. This one, it's like, no, you will look at the Cyberman, like, it's back.
It's so good. I mean, just imagine waiting a week to solve this cliffhanger to realize, oh, it's a fake. Just, wow.
Yeah, but that plays into Classic Who's ultimate problem, doesn't it? Every episode has to end in a cliffhanger that they immediately solve the next episode.
Yeah. But I think when I first watched this, I was convinced that it was a real Cyberman. I didn't realize there was a trick behind it. Did you realize there was a trick behind it?
Yeah, I didn't fall for it at all.
Well, because you're a smart 20-year-old man. I was like a 10-year-old kid. Leave me alone.
It was the thing that made me not fall for it was the fact that you see the Cybermen come out the wall, and then you see a gun come out the wall separately, and then it's like, okay, so the gun isn't attached to the Cyberman.
But yeah, in the original draft, that was supposed to be a live Cyberman, but I think it works a lot better. But it's a trap. It's a fake. It works so much better.
Yeah, I think it works a lot better that it's a fake as well, because it makes the ultimate reveal of the Cybermen at the end of this episode feel even more, of episode 2 that is, feel even more dramatic. It's like, oh no, they actually are back now. Whereas before it was like, it's like a training dummy, and it's like, oh, the Cybermen have, but then you remember you're in the tomb of the Cybermen. The Cybermen are long dead. There's nothing to worry about. Ha ha ha. You're being so silly thinking they're back. Oh no.
But yeah, this poor guy was only in 2 episodes of Doctor Who. And in this one, he just gets to lie down on the floor, have a nice, lovely little nap.
Yeah, although it probably wasn't a very comfy floor.
Probably not.
But yes, we will now roll right into episode 2.
We of the logicians have planned this. You're alive because of us. Now you will help us. We need your power. You need our mass intelligence. Are you listening? Do you understand me? Now that I have released you... Ah! Let me go! I set you free! It was our plan!
You belong to us. You shall be like us.
Episode 2 opens as every episode of Classic Who opens with the continuation of the cliffhanger from the previous episode, which makes binging it very effective. Literally, there's like no break. It's just immediately where you picked up from last time. So you just let that counter count down on BritBox. Okay, we're ready to go again. Like right where it left off. You could cut out the credits and just watch it as like a movie, honestly.
Yeah, that's what we did for a lot of these episodes, just so we could air like UK TV Gold just as a 2-hour block, which is how I watched a lot of classic Doctor Who, just in their omnibus form.
Just the worst paced movies in the world.
Yes. How come there's a big thing that happens every 25 minutes?
Yeah, it's like a 12-act structure. Like,
yes. And I think this episode shows the most that it's just waiting for the cliffhanger, and there's probably a lot of padding, but it's not as noticeable. But it's
I think episode 2 is probably the weakest in these 4 episode blocks. I think episode 3 for me was the best. I cannot wait to talk about that one next week. But yeah, episode 2 I think is the weakest one in the block.
See, Matthew, you just watched all 4 episodes. I haven't seen the last 2 parts of the story in maybe 8 years, so it'll be very interesting to go back to it.
Episode 3 is very good. I really enjoyed episode 3.
I can't wait.
Yeah. And this also, again, plays into a thing that happens in Classic Who all the time from my rewatching of it. And perhaps, it's just the episodes we've happened to choose. There is so much death in Classic Who compared to what there is in New Who. Like,
dude, a guy dies 5 minutes into the episode when he touches that door. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. People drop like flies in Classic Who.
But it really works to add to all the drama. It's like, I'm kind of invested in these characters, and it would be sad to see some of them go.
Yeah, and I think it would play into, back then, a lot of TV shows, especially if you're a kid, wouldn't feature death. They wouldn't have characters dying, and that's one of the reasons why watching Doctor Who would be like, hoo-hoo, people are dying, there's some scary elements to it. It's the thing that New Who captures in Russell T Davies' era a little bit more than Moffat's era, off of the, as we were talking about last week, or maybe the week before, the being scary but not quite too scary for kids. It's right in that perfect line of, oh, this feels a little bit adult.
Yeah. Yes, that's why I initially drew to Doctor Who, because when I watched Dalek, I was scared out of my mind. I was like, this isn't for kids. like we're talking about war and just the Daleks flying up the stairs, and I'm like, this isn't for kids. What? Am I allowed to watch this?
What I really like in this, so everyone is arguing in this scene about what killed this archaeologist. Why didn't they die? Was the Cyberman the one that did it? And they're trying to figure everything out, and the doctor's like, okay, the thing you have to consider is it wasn't the Cyberman because he was shot in the back. And they were like, what? He was shot in the back? He's like, yeah, just look. And then we see them pull over the archaeologist's body to look at his back, which is completely unscathed and looks totally normal.
Yeah, but it's not like a bullet hole or anything, really.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's his back.
There's some smoke, which looks pretty decent, but yeah, that's about it, really.
And then the doctor's like, okay, Jamie, you need to reconstruct the events that you went through to bring out that Cyberman. So you need to go on the panel and do everything. And he talks to everyone else. He's like, okay, if anyone feels uncomfortable about this, they need to just leave because this is a very dangerous situation. And then Jamie goes to leave, and he's like, no, Jamie, not you. He's so fun. I love Jamie. He's a great companion.
Yeah, apparently Fraser Hines was like with Prankster on set, which really comes across in his character.
Yeah, very, very, very comedic. We then see the Cyberman come out again and the big gun come through the wall, and unfortunately, as the gun's coming through the wall, you see the entire set fall backwards a bit because it's this giant gun, and clearly it's like a bit heavier than the walls are. But it happens very briefly, and then it shoots its laser, and we see the Cyberman's head explode, which causes Victoria, of course, to scream.
It's not classic Doctor Who if A, there isn't a wobbly set, or B, a woman screams.
Yeah. Well, I really like when everyone's talking about the Cybermen, and because they all have old-timey accents, and they're all talking BBC English, they call them Cybermans. It's like robots. The Cybermans.
But yeah, Victoria winds up picking up a cybermat, and she's like, oh, it's a fossil. What kind of fossils have you seen that look very robotic?
What sort of fossils are just sitting on the ground, not buried under rock?
And then the doctor's like, oh, leave it alone. And then she puts it in her bag.
She's great. She's not stupid at all.
So apparently in the script, it was supposed to be more obvious that she's intentionally disobeying the doctor. But I'm not sure why she's disobeying the doctor here. doesn't make any sense. It just really
it doesn't make any sense for her character at all, and also her performance doesn't portray that. Like when the doctor tells her to put the Cyberman down, the Cybermat, sorry, down, she goes, and then sticks it in her bag, and it's like the face she pulls makes it look like she thinks that that's putting it away, like she's following the instructions the doctor gave. Like the performance doesn't play that she's disobeying the doctor, and she didn't have any reason to disobey the doctor. She wanted to travel with him to come here. Like the doctor literally just saved her.
The only reason why she needed to get the Cybermat in her bag was because it plays in later on. There could have been any reason for the Cybermat to come and play later on. Like there could have been a Cybermat in the room, or it crawled into her bag when she dropped it out of fear. Like any kind of reason, honestly, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Also, in the background, you could just hear like sound effects as if the tomb is alive, and I think the sound effects really add to it.
Yeah, it's a really good piece of set design that you don't see in a lot of classic Who. Like just the thinking of what the place sounds like, and including that in the background. It's a very nice little attention to detail.
Like you just hear machines kind of like whirring and making noises,
and every now and then there's like a boop, like
yeah, and sometimes you could just hear like just a metal sound just rising and rising, creating suspense, and it really works.
Then everyone sits around the table like it's the film Alien. And the lead archaeologist says, very rightfully so. Watching this scene, I was like, he makes complete sense for what's going on right now, which is very rare to see in an episode of Doctor Who, someone thinking logically, where he's like, okay, I'm going to cancel this expedition. We've had 2 people die. It's time to go home. This is clearly too dangerous of a place for us to be in right now. We are not equipped for it. I was like, yeah, that 100% makes sense.
And it makes sense because we're all scientists. We're all really smart. It wouldn't have made sense if their plan wasn't to leave.
Yeah.
And then the lead archaeologist has a alien come out of his chest when he dies, and everybody screams.
And then it goes, hello, my darling, hello, my baby, hello.
Yeah, but there's a point where the characters are talking, and you can just see Toberman smile in the background. I'm not sure which part it is, or which conversation it is, but it's a really nice little touch. Yeah,
because Toberman has damaged the ship to get away following the orders of the villain lady, so he's like, ha ha ha, I'm so muscly and strong.
Yeah, probably with his bare hands. Yes. It's like
yeah, it's when they're talking about like someone destroyed the thing, and then the doctor goes, or something, and then Toberman's like grinning behind the doctor where he's like, yes, I am a giant monster, aren't I? I'm so muscly.
It's a nice little character moment for someone who isn't really much of a character. I think it's nice.
Yeah, very subtly in the background as well. Like you can just see Toberman's face between the doctors and the lead pilot.
Well, then obviously there was a break in recording because they have to find a Cyberman on the wall, find a portrait of a Cyberman, and transition into it. The next scene.
It's a slightly awkward transition, isn't it?
But again, it's like 1967. It's not that bad.
And I guess it's effective in also showing the passage of time.
Yes.
You know, the only thing that kind of lets it down is they didn't line up the shots perfectly. You know.
But yeah, it's a nice little transition. It's not too bad. But it's like, it reminds me of the Dick and Dom in the Bungalow series. Whenever they have to transition to Diddy, Dick and Dom, they always have a transition to a pre-recorded segment in the, like, you know, the little cupboard thing where Diddy, Dick and Dom come out of. And it's
very
always
vaguely. I haven't thought about that show in so long.
You know the little guys with big heads, and we do a little dance for like little puppets.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah.
But whenever we're doing that kind of transition, it's always awkward as well because it's live TV. This episode of Doctor Who is almost live TV as well.
Yeah. And we find out that it's going to take about 3 days to fix the spaceship, so they have to stay inside the tomb for about 3 days, which is insane considering they have no supplies. No one is carrying a bag full of food.
And there's no other spaceship on this planet either. It's not like there's a little blue block, box anywhere.
If only there was a spaceship that had enough space inside for everybody to get safely off the planet. God.
But then I guess he would be interfering with the events of the episode, so he can't have them all go inside his TARDIS.
I guess, but that's really stretching it, isn't it?
Well, it'd be a bit weird if in the middle of a story, the Doctor just like, oh, come into my TARDIS, and then the conflicts immediately stop because they're off planet.
But it would solve the problem that they're facing.
But yeah, the American guy stumbles on his line when he's talking about the rocket ship.
Yeah, because he's like, I want everyone to stay here until I can figure out who broke into the rocket, and the Doctor's like, or what? And he goes, or who broke into the rocket? And it's like, okay. But, I think it's interesting. With classic Who, the people stumbling over their lines every now and then, like, you see a lot in William Hartnell's performance as well as when he was the Doctor. To me, for whatever reason, it makes me believe their performance a little bit more. Where it's like, they seem more real. It seems like an actual conversation because people don't talk, like, non-stop without stumbling over a little few lines.
Yeah, because I've stumbled a million times in this podcast because it's realistic. Of course I'm going to stumble. A million times. It's only episode 17.
And then we find out that Space Captain did bring food for everybody. And he was very lovely, but he is making them wait there for 72 hours, which will be a fun trip, and I'm sure nothing will go wrong. And it doesn't. And then they all fly off home happy, and that was the end of the episode.
I'm sure of it, yes.
And then the Doctor looked at the camera and he went, well, the real Tomb of the Cybermen were the friends we made along the way. And then the credits rolled and it was a lovely time.
But yeah, this does remind me a little bit of a game Among Us, where somebody sabotaging everything.
Yeah, it's the thing, It's which was out around this time, the original film of the thing, not John Carpenter's one, which is incredible. One of my favorite movies of all time, but the original cut of the thing was around this time.
The remake isn't my cup of tea, but I think I need to rewatch it.
I love John Carpenter's The Thing. Oh my!
It's pretty good, but it's not my cup of tea. I'm sorry, don't hate me.
Wow, it's legit like one of my favorite films of all time. The Thing from Another World. Oh, The Thing from 1951. So it's like 10 years before this
almost
episode
20
aired.
Almost 20.
Jesus. It's an old film.
It's weird to consider. People in 1967 will be like, oh yeah, The Thing is a classic film.
Yeah. And then the Doctor is like wanting to help out with the math problems, and they're like, no, Doctor, you can't help out. And oh my God, big tall man, his name
Toberman.
Yes.
Yeah.
He tells the Doctor to stay and grabs him by his shirt, and the Doctor's like, wow, you're so big and strong. I bet you could do a lot of damage if put to the right place. Ha ha ha. I see, I'm figuring out that you're the one that broke the ship already. I'm so smart.
Mm-hmm.
And then they let the Doctor pass, and then it's more logic gate mathematics talk for a while.
There's a nice little bit where he says to Jamie and Victoria, oh, you can go into the TARDIS if you want. And I think that's nice that he considers they're in danger.
Yeah, it's again not something we ever see the Doctor do anymore, where he's like, oh, these people I care about are in danger. They could go be somewhere safe while I sort out this problem. He never gives that offer to anybody anymore.
Especially when he's meeting with Cyberman, one of his greatest villains at this time is like, yeah, I would take that offer. But it's amazing to think that the Cyberman only premiered like a little less than a year ago, and this is their third story in Doctor Who. That's insane.
Yeah, and I kind of get why they wouldn't take off, because it would feel like they're really shoving them down your throat, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Because after Patrick Troughton, they don't wind up in the show again until like 1974, like 5 years later. And then,
yeah.
And then again after that, we're not seeing again for another 6 or 7 years. It's like very sporadic appearances after this.
Yeah. And then in this scene that we're in, we get to watch a man list off letters and numbers to open the logic gate twice, because he does it wrong the first time, and then he has to do it again to get it right the second time. And it's like, okay, that filled 3 minutes of airtime.
There is a great little moment where the Doctor subtly helps him by moving
pressing
one of the levers.
Yeah.
It's great. But yeah, I do like how it's in real time. I like that. It's kind of nice to just sit there with a cup of tea and watch them solve these problems.
Yeah, it's long for sure. And then the doctor, everyone's deciding to go down the new door that just opened up, but they need to wrap up in warm clothing. And the doctor tells Victoria that she has to stay behind because, of course, she's a woman. But no, that's not the reason. It's to spy on the other evil lady that's there, which at least is a valid reason to make Victoria stay behind rather than just, oh, the women stay behind.
Also, I do love how Jamie's going down there in the freezing cold with a kilt on.
Yeah, well, you know. He's Scottish, he has to. It's
But yeah, there's a moment where Toberman potentially is going to stay with a woman, and the doctor's like, I'll just stay here then. which is a nice moment that he's protecting Victoria from any real danger.
Yeah.
Except, obviously, if something happens later on, that Victoria winds up in danger because she looks away for like 2 seconds.
Yep. But as they're climbing up the steps, did you notice that Toberman trips slightly as he's climbing the stairs?
Yes. I have it in my notes. I do love Patrick Troughton's little like cape thing he has.
Yeah, I was about to say the Doctor has a cape in this episode. It's a pretty interesting thing. It looks pretty decent on him as well. But then they all climb into the hatch, and we're left with Victoria and Evil Lady. And the Evil Lady's like, "Oh, there's food. Do you want some food?" And I quite liked this scene where Victoria's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll have some chicken if there's, because there's roast chicken." And then the Evil Lady gives her like a meat cube of chicken, like because it's obviously processed, scientific, probably not even real chicken. And Victoria's from the Victorian ages, so she's just like, I'm not eating this, I don't know what this is. And it's one of the few actual moments in this episode where I'm like, that's a pretty good look into what the future possibly could look like, with the food.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's also there's like a food machine in the TARDIS that does the exact same kind of like processed food kind of thing. I think it's in one of the early episodes where the three companions are just wanting food, and we go to this little food machine. And also, around this time, chicken was considered very expensive, so the audience at home wouldn't really eat chicken that much, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, she looks down the hatch for like a solid minute, and the woman poisons her tea. It's like, you had one job, just be careful. Look. And then she turns away a minute later.
Your job was literally keep an eye on the Evil Lady.
But we cut to all the scientists downstairs, and if you look at the ladders, they are designed for a big Cyberman. Like, all the steps are like uncomfortable for humans to climb down, which is a great detail.
Yeah, it's a really nice little attention to detail for the set design. And then they walk a little bit further in. And finally, halfway through episode 2 of this 4-part story, we see the Tomb of the Cybermen, and the guy even says it so that we know that it is, in fact, the Tomb of the Cybermen. And it's, I forgot I had seen this scene before, the scene where they come out in like a documentary or something is like the most iconic stuff from Doctor Who, and it's I get why it's there. It's pretty cool.
Also, the black and white really helps sell that this is ice. This is really cold. It looks great.
Yeah, it also sells you more on the miniature that you're looking at, where it makes it look a little bit larger because you can't make out all the details properly. Where it's just a small piece of cardboard.
So one of the scientists explained that the Tomb of the Cybermen is like a gigantic honeycomb, which kind of caused a Mandela effect for the audiences, because they didn't see this episode for like 30 years, so they kind of forgot what the episode looked like, and we were surprised to find out that the Tomb of the Cybermen wasn't hexagonal shaped, which is a very interesting Mandela effect without seeing the episode for like 23 years or whatever.
Yeah, everyone assumed that it was because they had the word bee implanted in their head and honeycomb. And that's all they could remember, yeah.
But it goes back to kind of like, I bet you a lot of people forgot about how cheap the effects look, because they created like their little own Mandela effect. The effects looking very convincing.
It's like when you go back to play a video game from your childhood, and you're like, this looks terrible. How did I ever play this? But when you're in your head, it looked super realistic. We're looking back on it, like it's your memory creates a lot of your own perception of reality because everything is aligned. We're in the Matrix.
Which is why I'm so forgiving for a lot of like really cheap costumes and all that in classic Doctor Who, because these things were only meant to be viewed once and then forgotten about. So like, they put in a lot of effort, but it wasn't as expensive as a movie per se.
Yeah, I get it. It is just it's good fun to poke and laugh at it sometimes, though.
It is, yes.
But we then cut back to Victoria and Evil Lady, as Victoria's very sleepy by the steps for some reason. She's like way over by the stairs.
It's also pretty weak acting, where she's just sitting there yawning.
Yeah, where Evil Lady's like, "Oh, you've barely touched your coffee. Do you want another one? Because it's poisoned." And Victoria's like, "Oh, I'm so sleepy. I don't want another one." And then very dramatically drops her head asleep. And then Evil Lady comes over and so roughly, I thought, grabs her by the hair to check that she's asleep. And then when she is asleep, she just like kind of throws her head away. Like, goodness, that's a bit rough there.
That is a good way of just making sure your victim is completely out of it.
Oh yeah, like it sells it really well, but I just wasn't expecting that sort of like almost physicality from this show. And then we see Evil Lady slam the doors to the Tomb of the Cybermen, trapping our heroes.
And this plays off of like Jerry Davis's childhood fears of claustrophobia, and it does feel very claustrophobic this episode. Also, none of the characters think to be like, "Oh hey, Toberman, why don't you try to hatch?"
Yeah, you're big and strong. You can break an entire fuel vesselage on a spaceship. And then we get a scene where everyone's panicking that the door's been hatched, that the hatch has been closed, and the Doctor notices that Evil Man isn't panicking, and he's like, "Of course I'm not panicking, because we can open the door using our logic problem solving with this gate here." And he stumbles over his line as he's saying logic something, and then the Doctor goes to say his line and also stumbles over his line as he's talking about logic. It's like, ooh, this was clearly a long day on set.
But it's just fun to see how television was made in the 60s. It's very fascinating. Like if they had to cut for time here, they would have to start nearly at the beginning. It's like insane to just think about how you couldn't cut back then.
Yeah, and also how efficient they'd have to be, because these are union workers working on the studio lot, like with BBC rules as well. So they have like I think it's like four tea breaks, a lunch break, like a very scheduled breaking system.
And they have to be out of there at 10 o'clock as well.
Yeah, like they have to be very on it and not letting anything mess up. Like if someone ruins a take, that's hours of work.
which is something that Barry Letts, our next producer of the Pertwee era, sought to kind of erase with better rehearsal times and better filming schedules and all that. Like this is a night and day difference comparing it to The Demons, and just how a lot of that episode was filmed outside and shot in proper using technology, and like this episode is almost shot live. It's insane how much things have changed in 4 years.
We were talking about how different the show feels now compared to back then, but the show difference between this season and John Pertwee's first season are incredibly different. Like it feel like different shows entirely, and that's within a few years, let alone a few decades. But the Evil Man fiddles with the logic gate, and oh no, he starts to defrost the Cybermen.
And again, it's where the sound design really sells it, because they obviously couldn't have water dripping in on set just in case of a fire hazard. But you can hear water dropping down, and you don't notice that it's not on screen.
Yeah, it's very good. And then as the Cybermen are coming out of their wee pods, they really, really take their time with it. Like I think every single character gets a chance to say, "The Cybermen, they're coming back, they're alive, they're moving." Like every single character has a line similar to that before we get to the close-up shots of the Cybermen coming out.
Like we're 9 minutes away from finishing the episode, and I think the Cybermen actually step out properly like 3 minutes or 2 minutes till the end.
Yeah, because one of the archaeologists starts panicking. He shuts the logic gate off, causing the Cybermen to revert back and close up their pods again. So we get our second tease of the Cybermen coming out. But yeah, they really take their time in climbing out of this their sleeping pod things.
But the sound of the machine whirring, just getting higher and higher pitched, really unsettles you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a real good sound design.
But yeah, the tomb that the Cybermen are escaping from was 20 feet high and had 5 stories, which is wild. They had to build this ginormous set. And apparently the set was slightly placed in the wrong area, so instead of moving the cameras, they moved the entire set, which is...
Jesus.
It took them like an hour just to move a set, which is insane.
Very, very much so.
But apparently the director couldn't move the cameras because wires would have been crossed or whatever, creating like a trip hazard or something, which is weird.
I mean, they're working with big, bulky old cameras, aren't they? So.
But yeah, just the thought of them having to move a set instead of any of the cameras is insane.
Yeah, and then we get Evil Man pulls a gun on the archaeologist who shut off the logic gate, and this is yet another gun in Classic Who. They're all over the place. At least there's not a policeman officer in this episode. That was refreshing. I think this is our first actual visual episode, because there was none in the... Oh, there was a cop in the audio drama with Eccleston.
Yeah.
This is our first episode without a policeman officer since episode 2 of the podcast. And the Evil Man has a very interesting technique with the gun, where he was pointing it at the archaeologist, and then he turned it away and fired and killed the archaeologist by shooting the wall. So he's like a master trick shot where he ricochets his bullets to kill the guy. It was a very interesting decision.
The stop motion effect of the tomb unfreezing is pretty solid, I'd say.
Yeah, it's a real good looking effect, and pretty simple to do. You just freeze it and then play it in reverse, or you.
Let's see how long it takes from getting out to finally escaping. The sequence starts at 7 minutes 30 away from ending the episode.
Yeah, it takes quite a while. The Cybermen in this specific version of the Cybermen are not exactly on the forefront of swiftness.
Yeah, they're very slow and deliberate, but the fact that they're trapped underneath and they're still slow and deliberate adds to the tension, I would say.
Yeah, it's like the Mike Myers sort of thing, where it's the villain that's always walking, but they seem to always catch up. They never run. You only ever see them moving slowly and methodically. It does add this sort of tension and unnervingness, because it's nothing should move that slow. What is going on?
It really does work in a way. But yeah, we then cut to Victoria, and I want you to keep an eye on the hatch as she starts waking up, because there's somebody moving inside of the hatch.
Okay, let's see. What is that? What is moving in the hatch?
It's somebody. I don't know who.
There's somebody in the hatch just looking at them. I wonder if it's the sound guy.
Yeah, or maybe the guy who closed the hatch or something.
Yeah. Weird.
Just some prop guy who just I kind of want to watch this episode. But imagine being that guy and being like, oh, I was in Doctor Who. Look at me. That's my eyes.
And then we get Victoria actually standing up for herself and being independent. It's this is actually quite a good moment for her, where she's arguing with Evil Lady and being like, I'm going to open the hatch, get out of my way. This is completely wrong what you're doing. And she only ever stops when the Evil Lady has to pull a gun on her. Which again, this episode not thinking about the future entirely well. It's like 1960s pistols.
Yeah.
It's a weird version of the future they've envisioned.
But when the Cybermat kind of becomes Victoria's best friend in this scene.
Yeah, it's she gave it a home. She let it stay in her bag. She looked after it. She raised it. It's protecting her.
Imagine if it just came out and it was like, Mother, 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 I will save you.
And then we see the Cybermen coming out of their cages again. So we are 2 minutes into them being woken up for the second time, and they are still climbing out.
But they did have I don't know how long they've been in there, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, but the fun thing is, if you're watching the Cybermen specifically, they keep replaying the footage every time they cut back of them ripping open the plastic sheen that's covering them, and then like they start to climb out, then it cuts away, then it cuts back, and they're ripping it open again, and then we cut to the close-ups, we see them ripping them open again, and like...
My favorite part is to watch the actors inside of them clearly not being able to see.
Really struggling to rip open the plastic film, yeah.
Like, their eyes are basically blindfolded with like cloth, and they're just peeking through like the fabric to see. It's not the best.
It's just as well the Cybermen have to move slowly.
But I love a little synchronized dancing they're kind of doing, just like that kind of thing.
Yeah. But we also find out the big bad guy's evil plan, which is to utilize the Cybermen's technology for his own benefit, I guess.
Yeah, because he's part of a cult or something.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. He's a bad guy who made the Cybermen come back to life.
Yeah, it's very vague on what his plan is, but he gets killed anyway, so it doesn't matter. Spoilers. Oh, but I love this music. It's so good.
Yeah, the music's great. And, watching the Cybermen climb out of the pods, I would be pretty terrifying back then, but watching it now, you can't help but laugh at some of them. Like, especially the first one, he, like, pierces open the film to climb out, and then he starts lifting his head, and his head gets stuck on the plastic, and he has to duck back down and climb out that way, and it's like, that just slightly ruined the tension for me there.
Yeah. And they're carefully climbing down the ladder so we don't fall down. Those poor actors.
Yeah, but again, to talk about the sound design here, the like creaking of their arms moving is really effective, I think, where you're just like every slight movement sounds not natural and mechanical and slow. And it's a very nice little piece of sound design. Also, these Cybermen only have 3 fingers, interestingly.
Yeah.
It's a weird choice for them to make.
You're just doing a Spock thing now.
Yeah.
So we cut back to Victoria and the bad lady, and she's apparently very deaf because she can't hear the beeping of the cybermat.
Yeah, and for people that were curious, we cut to the Cybermen climbing out of their tank for about a minute and a half of silence with just music playing. Like, good music, sure, but it's a long sequence of them climbing out.
It is, but they have to pad the episode out somehow. They have to have...
Yeah, not a lot happens in this episode, so...
No.
Yeah, so Evil Lady is definitely deaf, as you said, because that alarm is so loud. It is like... It's like a fire alarm's gone off in a school. It is this whirring, really loud, beeping alarm.
It is, and it hurts my ears, kind of, almost. It's like, ugh. I mean, I really like the shot where the cybermat just jumps on the table really quickly, and it starts moving very slowly again.
Yeah, that was nice. And then it jumps up on Evil Lady's arm, and she freaks out, and I guess passes out. And then Victoria grabs the cybermat, throws it, and shoots it dead. And just because you put it thinking that Victoria was her mum in my head, it's just like when she shoots it, just go, "Mother!"
But then she's tasked with the decision of trying to open up the gate, and she's like, "Oh no, I can't do anything because I'm a woman. I need a man's help."
Yeah, and also surely it wouldn't be that difficult to open the gate. Just flip the levers that are down.
Yeah,
you know. And she does. She like runs around the scene like a headless chicken, like completely lost as to what she's supposed to be doing or where she's going. She went from being like wanting to open the gate and going to do it herself to not knowing where she is or what she's supposed to be doing. It's interesting. Also,
when she runs out, she puts the gun down. Wouldn't you keep the gun just in case you run into more danger out there?
Yeah, or if the evil lady wakes up and now she's alone in the room and has a gun again. Yeah. Yeah, she goes running out screaming for this spaceship captain, and it's not great. It's not a great thing. We then see the Cybermen all walking and gathering round to be like together, and they all salute, but we don't see their faces when they salute. We just see the back of their heads, so it looks like their salute is like fake mustache. like it looks like they're just raising their hands up to their lips to do a mustache. It's an interesting salute.
When I looked at it, I thought they were kind of like scratching their heads. I was like, as if we're like, oh, it's morning. What am I doing up? It's really early. Who woke us?
Yeah, but they open the mini fridge where we see the big brain Cyberman on the toilet. And the big brain Cyberman, I quite enjoyed the design of him. Very much they reworked the design in New Who for the better with the upgraded Cybermen. I forget the like Cybermen Commando people, the generals that had the brain in the tank. Those ones look really cool and were clearly inspired by this design, which looks slightly less cool.
Yeah. So this cyber controller was played by Michael Kilgareth. He's apparently a huge actor in like stage and film. I mean, he needed a lot of convincing to get this role because he was like, he really wanted to speak as a cyber leader, and he was told he couldn't speak, and he was like, why not? If you want to know what his voice sounds like, he sounds very much like Brian Blessed. So he has a
that would have been
really
cool. Like,
he has a really interesting voice. Yeah,
it would have been a way of making the cyber leader just different from the other guys as well. You know?
Yeah,
like,
but he took the role anyway, so good on him. Like,
especially you don't see his face or anything.
I mean, he kind of reprised the role like 20 years later. So yeah, good on him. But apparently during this time, the BBC wanted to pay the Cybermen actors less money, and he kind of went up to the BBC and says he kind of fought for the people playing the Cybermen, basically being like, "Oh hey, we still have to learn the lines. We have to open our mouths to learn the lines and all that." Mm-hmm. And he fought to let the cyber people have more money, which is good on him. Good on him.
Yeah,
he's still alive, which is insane. He's like 86.
But there's quite a nice moment where the evil bad guy is walking up to the Cyberman being like, yes, I brought you back, blah, 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 blah. And then the cyber leader, without saying anything, just grabs his wrist really fast. And it's like the first bit of movement we've seen of them where they're quick. And it's like, oh, Christ, that was terrifying. And the music stings in as well. It's a really, really good moment.
Yeah, like you think the Cybermen are just going to be like, oh, hey, we'll work with you. And then you suddenly learn, oh, the Cybermen are just ruthless. They do not care about human life at all.
Yeah,
they just want to convert.
Yeah, it's got the great line that ends the episode. What is it? Hang on. You belong to us. You will be like us. And then the episode ends. It's a pretty effective way of ending the episode. Like it's quite terrifying. And again, another episode that ends looking at Cyberman's face.
I also love the Cyberman's voice. It's very robotic and just devoid of any life. I really like it.
The only thing that I could think, like, it's a really good voice, but if they're to replace the Daleks, do they seem different enough from the Daleks? You know, like they're robots that have robot voices that kill people. I can also get why they didn't super catch on.
Also, these Cybermen speak very slowly. Have you ever seen the first Cyberman appearance? Because their voices in the first appearance is very scary to me.
I haven't, no. We'll have to cover it on the show.
I'm going to send you a clip and we can just react to it right now. I'm sorry for diverging the episode just a little bit. But
it's fine. We're right at the end of episode 2 anyway, so... While you search for the clip, that brings us to the end of episode 2 of this story. And I think it's fine, this episode. I think it's the weakest, as I said. Like, it's 20 minutes of basically padding to that really good ending. I think the ending really lifts up the episode for me. The rest of it, I could really leave it. Not much happens. Like, they sit in a room, then they go downstairs, and then the episode ends. Like...
Yeah, the ending is certainly the highlight of the episode. The rest of the episode just feels like they're just padding time until they get to the ending. But overall, the episode still holds up pretty decently.
Yeah. what did you think about these two stories, these two parts?
A really solid introduction. Like, I can just feel the atmosphere just screaming at me from the screen. And I sent you a clip if you want to have a listen. I really like the sound of these Cybermen. You can play a clip if you want in the podcast.
But who or what are you?
We are called CYBERMEN.
CYBERMEN?
Yes, CYBERMEN. We were exactly like you once, but our cybernetic scientists realized that our race was getting weak.
Weak? How?
Our lifespan was getting shorter, so our scientists and doctors devised spare parts for our bodies until we could be almost completely replaced.
Interesting. When I was first listening to that voice, I didn't find it too scary because it's an Englishman. The Cyberman sounds like an Englishman, but then as he continued to talk more, it sounds more robotic, and it's like every now and then, like a word he'll say, it's like to the ba dee da, like words will just be elongated unnaturally, and it's like, oh, that's kind of creepy actually.
Yes, that's why that's probably my favorite Cyberman voice, because you can still hear like the humanity inside, but it's completely taken over by this robotic voice, and it's like, oh, that's my favorite Cyberman voice. And also, I think these Cybermen in Tomb of the Cybermen speak a bit too slowly, whereas in the 10th Planet they sound somewhat almost natural tempo.
Yeah, and you'll see it more in episodes 3 and 4 of this story, but yeah, the Cybermen and the Tomb of the Cybermen really take their time to talk with their words.
It's the same
and
problem
to get theirs.
It's the same problem we had with Azal in The Demons. He just spoke way too slowly, taking out the tension of his scenes. But I haven't seen the next two parts, so I'm not sure how much it fits, but these first two parts are really solid. They really set up a solid foundation of a really interesting premise and a really interesting cast of characters. I'm really intrigued to find out whether or not the next two parts hold up.
Yeah, and then this being a 4-part story instead of like a 5-part or a 6-part story really helps as well, because of the pacing. While sometimes it can be like, oh, you're padding out here, like them climbing up the hill or see the entire episode 2. The pacing is way better. Like the episodes fly by and blend together much easier than if it's like a 5 or a 6-part story where there's episodes where nothing happens.
Also, I'm going to argue for the pacing of episode 2, where we see a lot of people just discussing how to solve logic puzzles. I think it helps establish that these people are still really, really intelligent, and I think that's needed for the storyline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but do we need to see the Cybermen climbing out of their pod for 3 minutes? Do we need to see them climbing out their pod 3 separate times?
No, we don't, but it still works.
Yeah, it's a solid episode, and the story. I'm a big fan of the story itself. Like the other 2 episodes, as I say, they hold up really well. And episode 3 is my favorite.
I am so glad you like this story, because it is one of my favorites overall in Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's very good. I think probably one of my favorite Classic Who episodes we've visited so far. On it, I very much enjoyed it. But that brings us to the end of the episode, unless there's more to say.
A reasonably short episode for once.
Yeah, it's going to be like 2 hours 10, maybe 2 hours on the dot.
Wow, we did good.
Yeah, that's real good for covering 2 episodes of Classic Who. Usually that's us covered part 1. But that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back next week with part 2 of Jesus, hang on, let's try that again. We will be back next week with episodes 3 and 4 of the Tomb of the Cybermen, where we will be wrapping up this story. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook at Who Watches Who, on YouTube at Who Watches Who. Follow us on Twitter at WatchesDoctor for all your Bok memes. You can find me on Twitter at Cloth223. And do you have anything to add, Scott?
Yeah, if you have any thoughts of this episode, feel free to give us an email at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com. We will absolutely love to just hear your thoughts on this episode. It is the Cyberman's 55th anniversary soon, but yeah, we'd love to just hear your thoughts on the Cyberman overall. What's your favorite Cyberman appearance, your favorite Cyberman episode? Just give us your thoughts, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Please email us.
For me, my favorite Cyberman episode is probably the one where they first appear in Yoo-Hoo, just for the nostalgia's sake of it, because that was my first introduction to Cybermen, and they were so cool.
Yeah, for me, it's Tomb of the Cybermen, so I'm very happy we're covering it.
Yeah. But yeah, see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.